الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف المرسلين نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. We continue inshallah ta'ala from Risala في الفقه الميسر, and we are in the chapter of Al-Wasiyya. We finished the chapter of Al-Waqf briefly, and now we're talking about the Wasiyya also briefly inshallah ta'ala. And the Wasiyya, or the will, and the definition of it and some of the rulings of it and the conditions for it from a legal point of view, meaning fiqh point of view, not the law of the land. And in these types of contracts or these types of transactions, a Muslim should abide by what's in the deen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and then to make it effective, the person has to recognize the laws in the land to make sure that it's whatever the will is according to what is legal, as long as it's not against the deen of Allah, so that it gets executed. Otherwise, if a person writes a paper or something and then is of no value whatsoever, people would not honor it, it's never going to be executed. So what's the point of it? So it has to be also, you add to it how to make sure that this becomes binding, that this becomes executed in the way that it ought to be. So that's why these types of things, again, is we need to, sometimes it's even different from one state to the other here. So what makes a document legal and to be recognized? So this is something to be aware of, inshallah. So what is al-wasiyya? The ta'rif or the definition of al-wasiyya. What does it say in English?
Command to perform some act or disposition after death of the one making the bequest.
No. And the title of the chapter is bequest. Bequest. Okay. So al-wasiyya or bequest, the definition of it, هي الأمر بالتصرف بعد الموت. It's the command to dispose or to give something as a trust or a command or wealth or anything, but after death. After death. Because if it's during one's lifetime, it can be either waqf, as we talked about the waqf, endowment, or it can be a hiba, a gift which is hadiyah, or a hiba that is tabarru', someone gives something for charity in his lifetime. But al-wasiyya it's only an order or command in such a way that the deal that has to be with this or the disposition of it is after death. So the person would write a will, that means it's only to be executed after his death. That's basically what al-wasiyya, something very important in the wasiyya to remember. ويتضمن, and that includes إيصال الأمانات. Amanat, the plural of amana, something that is a person is entrusted with, to make sure that it reaches its people. Someone kept with someone else money or something of value, kept it with him, and he traveled, for example, or kept it with him to save it, as they used to do, for example, in old times. So he has something that he does not own; it belongs to someone else. Even he borrowed a book from the library, anything that does not belong to him. So if that person dies, people would not recognize that this belonged to someone else. So the will includes these types of amanat. This thing belongs to that person. These things belong to these places or this institution. Or if a person happened that he dies at any time, people would recognize these things to make sure that it reaches its owners or so. وَالتَّبَرُّعْ بِالْمَالِ, to give money, for example, in charity. And we'll talk about the rulings of that. And as mentioned before, it's up to 1/3 of one's wealth. وَتَزْوِيجِ الْبَنَاتِ, as he says, for the daughters to get them married. And who is the one, of course, the guardianship goes after the father, for example, to the orders according to the deen of Allah. But with matters of how for them to get married and things of that nature, غسل الميت, also part of the wasiyah that the person would say who to wash him after he dies, والصلاة عليه, and who to pray the janazah on him, وتفرقة الثلث, and to distribute the 1/3, and وغير ذلك, and more and more. So it doesn't have to be something physical. It also, part of the wasiyah is to give the wasiyah for the taqwa of Allah, to fear Allah, to be upon the tawheed, to stay away from shirk. As Ibrahim alayhi salam, he gave the wasiyah to his sons, and Yaqub, he gave the wasiyah to his sons, as it's mentioned in the Quran. So this is always the wasiyah at all times. For people after him to observe the deen of Allah, to stay upon the deen of Islam, to be away from shirk, and to do things, whether it's physical matters or non-physical matters. And when it's to be done after one's death. So the next point is al-asl fi mashru'iyyat al-wasiyya. What is the asl? Asl, whether it means foundation, but in the subject of al-fiqh, it refers a lot to the evidences, where that come from. Where did we come up with the will? You know, everybody has in their own legal system something called the will. But in our deen, it's based on the Quran and the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ. So it's in the deen of Allah. This is in the Quran, it's in the Sunnah, and upon the consensus of the ulama. كتب عليكم إذا حضر أحدكم الموت إن ترك خيرا الوصية. Surah Al-Baqarah verse 180, that it's been ordained upon you. That means it's part of the deen. When someone death falls upon him, that if he leaves something good when it comes to the wasiyah. Wasiyah, he leaves something after him of a wasiyah that is good. Because if he leaves a wasiyah that is evil, that means it's part of his evil actions. And as mentioned before, some people might enter the hellfire because of a wasiyah, because of injustice in a wasiyah also. And the Prophet ﷺ, he said, ما حق امرئ مسلم له شيء يوصي به يبيت ليلتين إلا ووصيته مكتوبة. There's no Muslim that he has a right that he needs to make wasiyah, to bequest and to make sure that it's a right to be fulfilled, that he has in his possession, that he to spend or to stay for 2 nights without his wasiyah written next to him. Meaning that it's not permissible. That's one of the categories of the wasiyah. Some of it is mandatory. Something, if a person thinks if he dies now, what's going to happen to the things that he has? For example, again, as we said, money, debt, whatever things are. Is it already documented or it's not documented? You know, becomes obligatory upon the person to make sure that rights are to be returned to its people. Sometimes only the person knows. You know, he has his own personal things. And he has money that he kept, his zakah money, for example. He got his zakah money out. You know, he put it in an envelope, waiting, or he, the time of the zakah was, for example, today. So today he has to get the zakah out. But he was not able to, whatever reason is, then he wrote a check or something, whatever it means, but no one knows except himself. What if he dies? People consider that it's part of their wealth and they won't give it as a zakah, and he's responsible. So the zakah or the wasiyah becomes obligatory upon the person if there was something that is upon his rights upon him, something as an obligation. That's why the 5 ahkam applies in the wasiyah. Sometimes it's wajib, sometimes it's obligatory, sometimes it's recommended, sometimes it's permissible, sometimes or some things are even disliked, and some things are even haram to write in the wasiyah that has haram in it. And that's why Abdullah ibn Umar, the narrator of the hadith, he says immediately he would record and write a wasiyah and he has it with him at all times. It doesn't have to be, again, something that a person writes and it's next to him. It basically, it's what works in whatever environment he's in. As we said, if a person writes a paper that with regards to the rights and it's not going to be honored, what's the point of it? So that means he has to do and take the means to make sure that these rights are to be fulfilled. ما تنعقد بالوصية? What makes something that a person would apply what we heard to be wasiyah, to make a command or to write something to be executed after his death? Either he says al-ibara or al-kitaba or al-ishara al-mufhima. Ulama, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala have mercy upon them, they don't leave anything. So whether a person would say it with a speech, so this is valid. Someone in his last days in this life and in his deathbed, he does not have the ability to write anything. So he says to the people, those who are close to him, that he is giving them wasiyah. He's saying, do this, take this to that person, do this with regards to whatever means after his death. So this can be done with speech, with al-kitaba, with writing, and al-ishara al-mufhima, to even give sign language, to point at something that people would understand what he wants to say. Whether he is mute, he is not able to speak, or someone, again, at the last, not necessarily the last moments of his life, but he's not able to speak, but he wants to say something, but he's not able to. So he would give signs that this is what he wants, and it has to be, of course, understood. So he talks about the three, al-ibara. He says no differences of opinions among the fuqaha, that the wasiyah is established and it's binding with al-lafz al-sarih, the explicit statement, bil-lafz al-sarih, saying, I make wasiyah مثل as he said, أوصيت لفلان بكذا. أوصيت, I make wasiyah to so and so by that much money. This is a clear, direct statement. This is الصريح. You know, the lafz الصريح والغير الصريح also it will come in the marriage and divorce. Someone says the word of divorce like that straightforward, or he says something that can mean divorce or it might not mean divorce. So if it's something صريح, straightforward, أوصيت, or I make it as a will or a bequest this to be, أو غير الصريح, or something that is indirect, implicit. الذي يفهم منه الوصية بالقرينة, that people would understand that this is a wasiyah with qarina. Qarina, that means another thing that you can attach to it. Meaning, as he says, كَجَعَلْتُ لَهُ بَعْدَ مَوْتِي كَذَا. I would make for so and so after I die this how much money that I want to give so and so after his death. He did not say wasiyah, but he says it in a way that to be understood. أو أشهد أني أوصيت لفلان بكذا, or أشهد, or be witness that I already أوصيت, even though this is a clear statement, that I made a wasiyah for someone with such and such. So the speech, whether it's صريح or غير صريح, whether it's explicit or not. If it's explicit, it's easy, it's understood. If it's not, then there has to be a qarina or another evidence or something with it that makes it a wasiyah and not something else. The second thing is al-kitaba, if it's written. إذا صدرت من عاجز عن النطق كالأخرس, if someone is not able to speak, like someone is deaf, and he wrote something. ومعتقل اللسان, someone that his tongue is not able to speak because of sickness. Also, إذا امتدت عقلته أو صار ميؤوسا من قدرته على النطق. That means if he try to speak, this will hurt him, or if he is not able to speak whatsoever. So writing. Or even if a person is able to speak, but he make the wasiyah in writing. So this is also one of the ways, and it's valid. The third one, which is al-ishara al-mufhima, pointing, having a sign that is understood, and that is also for the one that is not able to speak, but with a condition. The condition with al-ishara. The first two, al-ibara, speech, or al-kitaba, writing, they're both, if one or the other, that's fine, as long as it's clear that this is wasiyah. The third one, which is al-ishara, pointing at something, making some signs, this with a condition that the person is not able to speak. So someone is able to speak and he's making signs that people would understand that this is the wasiyah is not valid because he's able to speak. So what's wrong with him? So that's why he says بشرط أن يصير معتقل اللسان ميؤوسا من نطقه. Someone, his tongue is not able to speak and they give up on him able to speak. So this is with al-ishar. So any of these ways, the wasiyah is established. And of course, this is why specifically for the wasiyah, because the wasiyah is, many people, they do it when it's close to death. So a person might not be able to speak, a person might be sick. And that's why also there is the words that are said just before a person dies, is it valid or not? Because part of the wasiyah is not whether a person, if he's in sakarat al-maut, the last moment of his life, does it count or not? He has to be in his sound mind, of course. This is basically the criteria to know whether this is valid or not. And some of the ahkam, some of the rulings where also applies, or difference in applying it when a person in his deathbed, for example, divorce, for example. If a person divorces his wife in his deathbed, does it count or not? Then it's to be looked into it, because sometimes people might not be in their senses when they're doing it, their full capacity in their senses, or it's always the common example where a man is married a woman other than the mother of his children. So the children, grown-ups, and they come and they want to deprive this woman from inheritance. So they come to the father when he's dying and say, divorce this woman, and he loves his children, he doesn't want to make them upset. So he would say the words of divorce. That divorce doesn't count. and she would inherit. So usually with these types of matters, why at the last moments of his life would he divorce? Would they get him a paper of divorce to sign? So all of these types of things. So that's why there's separate ahkam. Ahkam al-marad in the rulings of sickness and the rulings of a person is in the deathbed. There are certain rulings that can be applied or differences in matters of applying it. One of which is the wasi. He says حكم الوصية. What is the ruling of the وصية? الوصية مشروعة ومأمور بها. مشروعة means what? It's part of the deen, part of the sharia. مشروعة. When it says مشروعة, it doesn't tells us whether it's obligatory or not. Just مشروعة. That means it's part of the deen. ومأمور بها. And we are commanded to do it. As Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, يا أيها الذين آمنوا شهادة بينكم إذا حضر أحدكم الموت حين الوصية اثنان. The rulings of the وصية to have two as witnesses for the wasiyah if someone is dying. أنواع الوصية, the different types of wasiyah, one of which is, he says, الوصية الواجبة, the obligatory wasiyah. There is obligatory and therefore there is مسنونة or recommended wasiyah. The obligatory wasiyah, as it's very clear, is وتكون على من عليه دين. It's upon the one that has a debt. وفي ذمته حقوق, and in his dhimma. A dhimma is when a person has upon himself certain rights. So there are rights that has to be observed, whether it's financial or non-financial, any types of responsibilities or rights. ولديه أمانات, and he has amanat, things that are entrusted, that he was entrusted with. وعهد, عهد is a worker that he has the money of his company, as they used to do in the past, where he takes, he has the salaries of the workers, right? He goes home with it, the accountant, right? The next day he's going to give the salary to the workers, in the old days when everything was cash, for example. So this money that he has in his possession, they call it uhda, this is the covenant, this is not belongs to him. So these types of things. فإنه يجب عليه أن يوضح ذلك كله بالكتابة. He has to make these types of things clear with الكتابة الواضحة, with clear writings, جلية, very obvious, very straightforward, التي تحدد الديون, that makes the debt very specific. إن كانت حالة أو مؤجلة, not just I have, there's a debt upon me that I have to pay, and then to leave it open like this. How much is it past due, or when is it due, and to who, and what is the name of that individual, with a way that makes it very clear. وما لديه من أمانات وعهد وذلك حتى يكون الوارث على أمر واضح حين تصرف فيما وكل إليه. With all kinds of clarities, so that the warith, the heirs, when they see it, the matter becomes very clear of what to dispose these types of trusts and things of that nature. So when a person is writing the will, he has to put himself into the mind frame of someone is reading this, that a walking person from the street, he needs to figure out what that means. So it should not have any hidden meanings and jeopardies and things of that. And it has to be very clear, without any ambiguity in it whatsoever. This is the obligatory one. الوصية المسنونة, the recommended one, والمرغب فيها, a person encouraged to have it, but it's not obligatory upon him. وهي التي تكون في ثلث المال فيما دون لغير وارث, in the 1/3 or less, to other than the heirs. Other than the heirs, those who would inherit by the laws of inheritance. So this is mustahabba, this is recommended. Recommended, but not necessarily for everyone. For example, as the ulama, they say, if someone is faqir, someone is poor, and he's leaving for his family not much. If he's leaving something, and if he doesn't leave anything, so there's no wasiyah anyway. But if he's leaving something very small, if it's distributed to his those who would inherit from him, it does not, value is not much. So they would say for someone like this, maybe it's not recommended for him to write something as a wasiyah. He should leave it to his inheritors because he's faqir, he's poor. But someone has the means, definitely it's recommended. And it's a way for a person to choose in his lifetime something that would be a source of a good deed for him. He writes a portion of his wealth to the masjid, or to a charitable organization, or something of that nature, or an individual that is not going to inherit from him. And sometimes, because as we know that the wasiyah, if it's to a warith, is not permissible, and it would never be executed if it's to one of the heirs that would inherit from him by the laws of inheritance. It's not permissible for him to do so, and if he does so, it is not to be given to him unless they would approve of it. And sometimes it's a person might say, for example, he wants to write a will, something for a relative that won't necessarily inherit from him, which is fine. It's permissible. He's not aware of it. But say, for example, he wrote something, portion of his wealth, to his brother, or I'm sorry, to, for example, his cousin, okay, or yeah, oh yeah, say his brother, okay, write something for his brother, okay, and he was doing that not knowing. First of all, he doesn't have any kids, doesn't have anyone, so his brother would inherit from him anyway. So, but not knowing the ruling, so he wrote in his will something for his brother that is a warith, right? He would inherit from him. But right before that person died, he received a child. So now the brother is not going to inherit anything. So the wasiyah then works. Even though when he wrote it, it was not valid, meaning because, but he was still alive. Right? It's valid or not valid when he dies. So what counts is when that person dies, who are present. If he wrote anything in his will for someone from among those who are alive when he died, that are from his heirs, then it is not permissible to be given to them. But what if when it was written, it was to one of his heirs if he would die then, but then something happened and that person becomes or does not inherit anything. So just to pay attention to the fact is that the 1/3 or less is to غير وارث, and nobody knows who's going to inherit from who because no one knows who's going to die before who. He says فهذه مستحبة, this is recommended. And as Ibn Abbas radiallahu anhuma, he chose the opinion of 1/5, not even 1/3, because الثلث كثير, as the Prophet ﷺ said that الثلث is the maximum and الثلث كثير, it's a lot. So the best is to make it 1/5 according to what Ibn Abbas radiallahu anhuma said, but again a person has the option. So فهذه مستحبة, this is recommended. وتصرف في أعمال البر, and to be given in all kinds of actions of righteousness. وطرق الخير, all different paths of خير, سواء كانت خاصة, whether it's specific لفلان قريبا, or to a specific relative, أو أجنبيا, meaning not a relative. Can a person write in his will something for a kafir? The answer is yes. Ruling wise, yes. But not in a way that it's going to be given to a sinful place. But an individual. Say a neighbor, for example, that he helped him so much, and he wanted to write something. Can you give in your lifetime a gift to your neighbor that is a kafir? Yes. So he wanted to give him something after he dies. It's permissible. In principle, it's permissible. But a person, of course, has to be careful not to write something for someone that would be used in matters of sins. So whether it's relative or not, أو لجهة معينة, or to an institution, كالمسجد الفلاني, like a specific masjid, or مساجد, or schools and libraries and ملاجئ, refugee, what's ملاجئ? Where they put the refugees in, hospitals, things like this. But again, these types of things, it has to be run and governed by those who are not going to use it in a sinful way. So not to write his wealth for a place where they are upon shirk, and the hospital that is upon shirk, or calling people to worship Jesus and not Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, things of that nature. So it's not about just helping people, but also this money can be used to call people to associate partners with Allah. So things has to be clear, no shirk, no sins, and so on. So this is the recommended. So there's the obligation and the recommended. Is clear the obligation if there's rights upon the person, and the recommended, it's up to the 1/3 of one's money. He says, وَقَدْرُ الْوَصِيَّةِ, the qadr or the portion, how much is the wasiyah? لا يجوز أن تتجاوز الوصية الثلث. It is not permissible to exceed 1/3. لقول النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم, because the Prophet عليه الصلاة والسلام said to Sa'd ibn Mu'adh when he said to him, أوصي بمالي كله, when he was sick and he didn't die radiallahu anhu, as the Prophet عليه الصلاة والسلام said to him, لعلك تخلف يا أصحابك, maybe that you're going to live longer and people will benefit from you and people will be harmed from you, and he did. So but he was sick and he said to the Prophet عليه الصلاة والسلام, أوصي بمالي كله, and you see how when they're sick they are concerned of what's going to happen. So should I give all of my wealth as a wasiyah? So the Prophet عليه الصلاة والسلام, he said no. He said قال بالشطر, should I give half of it? He said no. قال بالثلث, he said 1/3. He said الثلث والثلث كثير. He said, the Prophet عليه الصلاة والسلام, 1/3 yes, and الثلث كثير, even though it's a lot. So but this is the maximum. ولا يجوز الوصية لوارث أو لأجنبي في أكثر من الثلث إلا بإجازة الورث. More than that, it is not permissible unless the heirs would agree if it's something like that happened. But it's not permissible for someone to do such a thing. Some of the rules here, briefly, inshallah ta'ala, ما يعتبر لصحة الوصية. Things to be considered to make sure that the وصية or the will is valid. أن تكون بالمعروف أي بالعدل. That it's upon المعروف, what is known to be good. That means it's just. So for someone to write in the wasiyah that that person gets something and the one that is in the same level not to get anything, this is something that can bring hatred in the hearts or envy or something of that nature. So it has to be based on justice and based on goodness, or not to be done as a way to defeat someone or to revenge from someone or any of these types of things. The second thing, أن تكون على ما شرعه الله على لسان نبيه صلى الله عليه وسلم, to be upon what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala revealed to the Prophet عليه الصلاة والسلام. Meaning if the wasiyah is something that is not financial, or again, this means even if it's financial, to be halal, not to be upon something haram, not to use the money for a trust, to give loans with riba to the people, anything of that nature, something that is haram. Or also it means that is not opposing the deen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, or if it's not something financial, to say something that is according to the deen of Allah. So not to say, for example, that a person would make a wasiyah that people have a big party after he dies and they get the singer that he loves so much to sing in his party, for example. Well, that's not to be fulfilled, even if it's his wasiyah. Because it's not permissible. It has to be something according to the deen of Allah. Number 3, على الموصي أن يخلص أو أن يخلص عمله أو أن يخلص عمله لله وأن يقصد بوصيته أعمال البر والخير. That the musi is the one that makes the wasi. So we have al-musi. Al-musi is the one that is making the wasiyah. He should purify his action, make it sincerely for the sake of Allah, and that he intend with the wasiyah a'malul bir, to make righteous actions and khair. Again, not to defeat someone or to oppose someone or things of that nature. The last thing, inshallah ta'ala, we'll take is ما يشترط في الموصي. What is conditions in the musi? Who's the musi? The one that is going to write the wasiyah. أن يكون أهلا للتبرع, as the previous contracts and transactions. He has to be fit to give a charitable act, because this is a form of charity. So to be fit to this, and the one that has the fitness or the ability to do that is the one that has the ability to buy and sell. So basically, it's his money. Or he, not ahlan here refers to the capacity of the person. So he's not insane, for example. He is sane, he's able to make decisions. Because the next one, أن يكون مالكا, that he's an owner, not that he makes wasiyah for someone else's wealth. The third one, أن يكون راضيا مختارا, that he is his choice and he's pleased with it, not that he's forced. So if someone force him, make him sign on a paper that he is not approving of, then this is, of course, invalidates the wasiyah. But this might happen, and a person dies, and people might present this, but this is basically their way to the hellfire. Because a judge or so, he only can judge with what he sees with his own eyes. The fourth one, this is the 3 conditions. في الموصي أن يكون أهلا للتبرع. That means he he fits to give charitable something for charity, that he's an owner and he is not someone that is forced, someone that did it as a choice and he's pleased with it. Let's take the next one and then we'll stop inshallah. ما يشترط في الموصلة. What is a condition for the one that is going to receive the wasiyah? So we have the wasiyah, the musi, the one that writes the wasiyah. Al-musalahu is the one that would receive and benefit from the wasiyah. And we have the wasiyah itself. Or al-musabih, or the wasiyah, the content of it itself. So al-musalahu, the one that is going to be given the wasiyah, the benefit from it, it says conditions here. Number 1, 6 conditions. أن يكون على جهة بر أو مباح. That it has to be for a matter of righteousness or something permissible. Because as we said, the wasiyah can be to an individual or to an institution or anything. So it has to be something upon righteousness and or mubah, that means permissible. Like, for example, if someone writes his will for something of no righteousness, and it's something funny that it's, writes his will to make a place for the bugs to, something funny that has no value to it. Sometimes people, they don't know what to do with their money. Or someone, say for example, says that in his wasiyah that his money is to be burned. Some people might do this. They don't want their money to be given to no one whatsoever. Is that something to be fulfilled? No. But subhanAllah, some of the ulama, they would, if someone did this in his wasiyah, they say, yes, sure, no problem. But they take the money and they spend it in something to be burned, like the bukhur in the masjid. They buy the bukhur. What's bukhur? The scented thing in the masjid. It's burning. Or lamps, when they used to put it to fire in the masjid. Something is going to be burned with this, but not to burn the money, of course. So things that has to be either righteous, matters of righteousness, or something that is permissible. Number 2, أن يكون الموصى له موجودا وقت الوصية تحقيقا أو تقديرا وعلى ذلك تصح الوصية للمعدوم. That al-musa lahu, the one that is going to benefit the beneficiary from the wasiyah, he has to be present when the wasiyah is established. Whether it's tahqiqan or taqdiran, meaning if someone writes in his wasiyah, this money is to go to this person has to be present, not someone that died, for example, right? The tahqiqan, that means it's going to reach him for sure, or taqdiran, which meaning he might not be present while the wasiyah is written, he might not exist whatsoever, and it still can be valid. So, for example, if someone writes in the wasiyah that someone is pregnant, and that money is to go to that child when he's born, he's not present now. So if the child becomes alive, then and the person died, whether he died before that or after, it doesn't matter. Or what if he dies, the child, then is not to be given to anyone, which is another thing. I'm not sure if it's going to mention it here. If someone writes a wasiyah to a person, and that person died, the one that is supposed to benefit from the wasiyah died, and he, say for example, the one that wrote the wasiyah died, and in the same day or the next day, the one that the wasiyah was written for, he also died. Does this money goes to the inheritors of the musa lahu, or it doesn't? It doesn't, because he only made the wasiyah. He did not have an ownership of it yet, so he has to have ownership for it before it gets to be passed on to his inheritors. So this is, again, he has to be present, whether really present or something that, for example, the first masjid to be built in the town it's not built yet, but this is what he wants to have in the wasiyah. Things of that nature. So, but it has to be to something specific. It cannot to be for something general. أن يكون الشخص معلوما. Number 3, that the person has to be known, if it's a person, a specific individual. Not that I give the wasiyah to the first person that you meet and his name is Hassan. This is not something to be executed. So for him to be known. Number 4, أن يكون أهلا للتملك والاستحقاق. The one that would benefit, he has to be also someone that can own something and deserves to own. So not someone that would use it in something sinful or someone that is insane and things like this. Unless it's to take care of the person, but he's not going to own it, it's going to be spent on that person that is not fit. Number 5, أن يكون غير قاتل. That he is meaning the beneficiary of the wasiyah. He's not a killer to the one that made the wasiyah too. So as the Prophet والسلام, he mentioned that if someone القاتل لا يرث, if someone killed someone that he inherits from him, someone والعياذ بالله, for example, killed his brother and he was supposed to inherit from his brother, then he does not inherit anything from him because he killed him. Right? Because if he inherits from him, person would say, well, if they arrest him, they're going to execute him. So what's the point of that he has inheritance? Does he inherit from his brother that he killed or no? The answer is no. And this is no differences of opinions in this whatsoever. The same thing with the wasiyah. If a person wrote in his wasiyah for his servant, to take that much money, and then the servant killed him, then they open the wasiyah and they see that the servant has something, then of course he does not deserve it because he killed the person. Number 6, يشترط في الموصى له ألا يكون وارثا, that he has to be not from the heirs, not that he would inherit normally. This is not permissible also. So these are 6 conditions. يكون أهلا, that he is fit to receive. That the wasiyah is to be given to something of righteousness or permissible, that he has to be present, whether physically or can you translate, or can you read the translation of the second condition in this last part? أن يكون تقديرا.
Existing in reality or theoretically, such as the child in the mother's womb at the time of the bequest. It is not valid to make a bequest for someone who does not exist.
No. So the wasiyah has to be given to someone, whether he's present in reality or theoretically, right? As we said, as we heard. So there has to be some presence, which is the third one, that he has to be known, specific person, that he has to fit to own, and he deserves to own. Number 5, that he's not a killer. Number 6, that he's not a warith. He is not one of the heirs. We'll stop here, inshallah. We'll take the hadith, and then if you have any questions. The hadith is from the book of Bulugh al-Maram. So it should be 70 something. Hadith in Fiqh. No, hadith number 77. This is where we reached. Hadith number 77. Hadith number 77. On the subject of a tayammum. Everyone is there? Okay. عن جابر بن عبد الله رضي الله عنهما أن النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم قال: أعطيت 5 لم يعطهن أحد قبلي. أعطيت 5 لم يعطهن أحد قبلي. نصرت بالرعب مسيرة شهر. نصرت بالرعب مسيرة شهر. وجعلت لي الأرض وجعلت لي الأرض مسجدا وطهورا. مسجدا وطهورا. وجعلت لي الأرض مسجدا وطهورا. فأيما رجل أدركته الصلاة فليصلي. فأيما رجل أدركته الصلاة فليصلي. وذكر الحديث because the hadith is only for the shahid or for what the subject. But we can talk about, but this is what needs to be memorized inshallah. So the hadith, the reporter of the hadith, the narrator is Jabir ibn Abdullah, and they used to like the hadith of Jabir radiallahu anhu because his Islam was late, so that means anything is mentioned there is not mansukh, is not abrogated, is not changed. That the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, أعطيت خمسا لم يعطهن أحد قبلي. I was given أعطيت in the passive tense. أعطى is to be someone to give someone something. So أعطيت, I was given. خمسا, 5 things. لم يعطهن, same thing, يعطهن in the passive tense. None of لم يعطهن أحد, none أحد يعطهن, given these 5 قبلي, before me. So لم يعطهن خمسا is referring to يعطهن. These 5 were never given to anyone before me, any of the prophets before me. This is something that the Prophet ﷺ was given, and no prophets before has been given this. The first one, نصرت بالرعب مسيرة شهر. نصرت, I was given victory بالرعب, with extreme fear, مسيرة شهر, from a month journey or a month distance. That means before the Prophet ﷺ goes out to meet his enemies, the enemies already from a distance that is month away, their hearts are full of the fear of the Prophet ﷺ and the army of the Prophet ﷺ. And of course, once they have this is the main reason for their defeat. So if the army is afraid, then it's easy for them to be defeated. And as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said that about the Prophet ﷺ, it's clearly in the Quran. نصرت بالرعب مسيرة شهر وجعلت لي الأرض, and جعلت لي also in the passive tense. Al-ard is the earth. جعلت لي has been made for me. Al-ard, the earth. Masjidan, a place of salah or sujud. Masjidan, or a place of the salah like a masjid. وطهورا, and a place of purification. A place of salah, masjidan wa tahura, and a place of purification, which is referring to the tayammum. So this is what is meant by the earth, is means of purification. So then, فأيما رجل أدركته الصلاة فليصلي. فأيما رجل, any رجل, any man, أدركته الصلاة. الصلاة أدركته. الإدراك is when you attain something, when you reach something. So the salah reached him. That means it's time for the salah. Salatul Dhuhr entered. So as if the salah reached you. Now it came to you, the salah, right? أيما رجل أدركته الصلاة فليصلي, then let him pray. There's no excuse. You don't have to have a masjid to pray in if you're not close to a masjid, if you are in the desert somewhere or in a valley somewhere and it's time for the salah, then make salah. Don't wait and then you miss the salah. Because the earth has been made for the Prophet ﷺ, meaning for the ummah of the Prophet ﷺ, a place where you can make salah on, and you can also make tahara. If you have water, you make wudu. You don't have water, what do you do? Wait till you go home and use the water? No, make tayammum then, and then make your salah. Especially, of course, if you're not going to make it if you go home. So that means, again, as we see, there's no excuse to miss the salah whatsoever. So a person, the salah time comes, he should pray. And if he has the water, then he makes wudu. If he doesn't, that he makes tayammum with the conditions of tayammum as we mentioned before. And the earth has been made, which is something that was not to the prophets before. People, when they make their prayers, they have to go to their places, temples, whatever there is, and this is how they observe their ibadah. For a Muslim, جُعِلَتْ لِيَ الْأَرْضُ مَسْجِدًا وَطَهُورًا. Any place, Salah time comes, you pray. Well, in the earth, and as long as, of course, it's not impure and things like this. So we'll say it again, inshallah, for the memorization. أعطيت خمسا. Inshallah, when you memorize it, make sure that you, نحو-wise, grammar-wise, you should say it right, inshallah. أعطيت خمسا لم يعطهن أحد قبلي. نصرت بالرعب مسيرة شهر. وجعلت لي الأرض مسجدا وطهورا. فأيما رجل أدركته الصلاة فليصلي. What are the rest of the five, so that we also have it in, and we can be tested upon them as far as the knowledge is concerned. Sure, we would not been including the hadith, we should, inshallah. So the hadith should be included in the test, inshallah. So the hadith is muttafaqun alayhi in Bukhari and Muslim, which is these first two are mentioned, and then the Prophet ﷺ said, which is, we don't have it here with us, وَأُحِلَّتْ لِيَ الْمَغَانِمْ, that al-maghanim, the booty of the war, was made permissible for me, for the ummah of the Prophet ﷺ, وَلَمْ تُحَلْ لِأَحَدٍ قَبْلِ, and it was not permissible for those who before me. They used to burn it and to get rid of it. And وَأُعْطِيتُ الشَّفَاعَةِ, and I was given الشَّفَاعَةِ, the intercession. وَكَانَ النَّبِيُّ يُبْعَثُ إِلَى قَوْمِهِ خَاصَّةً, and a prophet would be sent to his people only. All of the prophets before, they were only sent to their people. Isa alayhi salam was sent to Bani Israel. Musa alayhi salam was sent to Bani Israel. Like this. وَبُعِثْتُ إِلَى النَّاسِ عَامًّا, and I was sent to all mankind. So these are unique things for the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam. So the first two that we heard in the hadith, and number 3 is أُحِلَّتْ لِيَ الْمَغَانِمْ, the booty of the war. Number 4, الشفاعة, the intercession, which is only to the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam, الشفاعة العامة, to all humanity for the reckoning to start. And the 5th one, that every messenger was sent to his people, and I was sent to all mankind. We'll stop here, inshallah. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make us benefit, inshallah. بارك الله فيكم وصلى الله وسلم على محمد وصحبه وسلم.